Hello, hi. I'll just share my presentation, so hopefully you'll be able to see this. So I just really wanted to follow on from what Chad just said. Don't pay the ransom. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. How do we change businesses from how we're currently running to getting to a state where we're so resilient we can handle ransomware as a business as usual activity? So the same way we kind of handle malware incidents at the moment, how do we get to that state so that we can handle ransomware? And in fact, we're so confident in our part in helping customers achieve this that actually we offer a $5 million ransomware recovery warranty. But there's not going to be much talk about product in today's presentation. There's an awful lot of talk about approach. And that is because I come from your side of the fence. It was interesting that John T mentioned Chase earlier. So I used to be the cyber risk manager for corporate and investment bank at JP Chase. And I also head up their global cyber transformation and their cyber excellence departments. So I was actually responsible for doing some of the cyber transformation within the bank as a result of the 2014 breach we had, up to the point where we were spending $650 million a year on cyber resilience. So the one thing I'm not going to do today is this, right? The obligatory scare slide, the screenshots of how much ransomware are costing organizations in Africa or across the globe, because we know, like, it's at the forefront of every government discussion about resiliency in business. Here in the United Kingdom, the National Cybersecurity Centre said it is the #1 threat to businesses, not COVID, not Brexit, not any other problem that we have. It is actually ransomware, actually is a systemic risk to supply chains, to critical national infrastructure across the country. And how have we traditionally handled security? Well, I spent a large amount of my time prior to joining JP Morgan. For 10 years, I built security operations centers. So I built the security operations center. I had a team of consultants at Apple, Microsoft, Walmart, Citi, Wells Fargo, BP, Shell, MTN, a lot of organizations, different vertical markets. But almost all organizations have this security mindset, moat and walls. We will prevent things from happening, or if they happen, we will detect them. The problem with the security mindset is there's always a Trojan horse. There's always a way around. Adversaries only need to be right once. We need to be right every time. And now that ransomware operators are actually now making enough money to gain access to 0 days, how do we make sure that our SIM use cases, our rules in our detective and preventative controls, no matter how good your threat intelligence are ahead of the attackers? We can't, right? And I've came 25 years operationally working in detection and prevention. And as the CISO of Mimecast, another organization with strong African heritage, I came to realize that we need to build an ability to respond and recover much better than we have historically. So this is what the conversation is going to be talking about today. And, as a couple of people have already mentioned, the CISO's world today is very different. I remember being able to go in and hug a server. I used to be able to go into my physical data center, look at my 55,000 servers and go, I'm the master of the entire domain. But now we have complex software supply chains. We have bring your own device, moving to the cloud, CI/CD and agile development methodologies, containerization, IoT, working from home, microservices. So we're losing control over the infrastructure that we're supporting. So this consideration that we can secure everything, where we've got these kind of hybrid responsibility models that are shared across two parties, we need to build resilience. And the other thing is, if we don't build resilience and we stop the business adopting those technologies, there's a very famous king of Sweden, Norway, and the United Kingdom called King Canute. And he actually believed he was so powerful he could hold back the tide. So he stood at the beach, put his hand out, tried to stop the tide coming in, guess what? His feet got very wet. And I've seen CISOs which are out there trying to stop the business making money. You know, we're trying to, you've got to remember, security is always a cost center, right? We have value to the business, but we are a cost center. Sometimes we can't demonstrate that value, but we're a cost center. And we stand in the way of the people trying to make us competitive and deliver projects. That's just not going to work. So whatever solution we come up with to be more resilient, it needs to change as the structure of the organization changes with mergers and acquisitions, changes adversary behavior changes, and changes, we change the way we deliver IT. We've gone from physical service to virtualization to containerization to cloud. So we need to build this resilience in a way that does that. And one of the things I mentioned is I used to build security operations centers. So I did this for about a decade between 2011 and 2019. So I needed to understand, you know, what the state was of an organization, its cultural, political resistance to change, as well as its people, process, and technology before I could build a capability. So I used to review about 300 different areas of these on a maturity index. The maturity index, 0, you don't do anything. 1, it's ad hoc. Every person does it differently, or every time you do it differently. 2, documented, you do it. 3, documented, you do it, you collect metrics. 4, use the metrics to get better. 5, you have financial metrics. You know the cost of every person, every control, every process, and the value it adds. And when I first started doing this in 2011, these are US figures because I could only get the US spend figures. I didn't have them for Africa or the whole world. So the maturity of US organizations was 1.22, right? So, and they were spending 30 billion on cybersecurity. So this is, you know, somewhere between closer to ad hoc than documented. But then I fast forward to nearly a decade later, and we'd gone up 127% on what we're spending, but our operational capability had only gone up less than 7%. And I found out there's this no linear relationship between the spend that we make on kit and the actual operational capability we have. And a lot of the time we're trying to build this newfangled, the best threat intelligence analysis capability in the world, and we don't know where our assets are. We don't do the basics because the basics are difficult. So I'm going to talk about cyber risk management, especially as it relates to malware and ransomware and what the difference is. So I use FAIR, love FAIR, Factor Analysis of Information Risk, as a quantitative risk analysis or semi-quantitative risk analysis profile. But we have likelihood and we have impact. And how often you get attacked, which is how motivated attackers are to attack you, the probability of action, and how exposed your assets are, the contact frequency. Then we have the vulnerabilities that you have and how good your controls are. But then we have 2 types of losses, and we have primary losses. This is the inability of you to deliver your business mission. And the second one is secondary losses. And this is what we normally see in cybersecurity incidents. This is regulatory fines. This is loss of reputation. We don't actually see that much primary loss, right, where we can't deliver the business in cybersecurity incidents. We have very large worms every so often that happen, but we are starting to see primary losses because of ransomware. And if we look at the Lockheed Martin kill chain, this was actually devised by my ex-boss at JP Chase when he was at Lockheed Martin. And, you know, we have an operational cost. Until you get to that action on objectives, the only thing we're really paying is for the time of our people to investigate, contain, eradicate, and respond. It is only once that action on objectives has happened that there is actually a cost to the business. And if we look at malware, what happened is with malware, the attackers, you know, the average dwell time for your typical malware-based, we gain access, we laterally move, and we try and exfiltrate data. Average dwell time is about 255 days. And they have to go through multiple stages. They buy initial access from the initial access broker. They have to reconnoiter the network, move between devices. Then once they've exfiltrated your data, they have to sell it on a dark market. How much are they going to get? $1.5 per credit card number with a CVV number. it's not a good business model. There's plenty of cybercrime out there, but compared with ransomware, the motivation of attackers and their chances of getting caught as they move across these different stages, tactics, MITRE attack tactics as they go through their attack, the chances of getting caught are actually quite high. And that's why we see so many malware events or malware originated events in the business. Now, ransomware is different, right? Because ransomware, there is a primary loss and the motivation is high because attackers can monetize. If you look at something like Conti, they get monetization within 3 hours to 3 weeks, right? Compared with 255 days dwell time, they get their money. And ransomware as a service is meaning that it's much easier to launch an attack. So that's bright red compared with malware. And if you look, we now have primary losses. The business, and if we're a part of the supply chain, our partners could not deliver the primary services. It's a very different risk. And you could say, well, I've got vendor X. You could, and I've been taken to some great lunches by vendors. We have this problem where the average enterprise has 130 different security products in there. Each of them need licensing, maintenance, integration. And my experience looking at that 1.22 score is most organizations can't operationalize controls very well. And we're on this hamster wheel of doing a risk assessment, asking for budget, doing an RFI, down selecting vendors, POCing it, and then getting 2 months to integrate it and operationalize it before we're back on that hamster wheel in the next year. Otherwise, we're going to lose budget. And this is why I'm seeing a lot of operational CISOs now talk about tool consolidation. But this came from Sophos. This came from a network and endpoint security vendor who said 75% of people paying ransoms have some kind of preventative or detective solution in place. And we're seeing a lot of these vendors that have been selling preventative controls that were malware controls because the attack vectors are very similar as entry points for ransomware, suddenly becoming ransomware prevention companies. Now, we all know our businesses never get malware, do they? Yes, we get malware incidents weekly, daily, monthly. And so the only difference between the attack vector of malware and ransomware is the outcome, the actions on objectives. So if your solutions have been failing historically to prevent malware, they're going to fail to prevent ransomware. This is why resilience, response, recovery is the most important factor. So we need to get to this resilient mindset, prevent where we can, but be resilient when those preventions technologies fail. And, that's what my hair used to look like before I was in a customer with a ransomware incident. So I was at Saudi Aramco while the wiper attack was happening there, 34,000 servers wiped. If you think a malware playbook is going to save you from ransomware, think again. Your voice over IP systems are down because they potentially run on Windows infrastructure or rely on an IDAM solution to authenticate them. SSO, no SIM, no case management. Saudi Aramco actually bought typewriters and had physical runners going between the different places. Now, their oil kept flowing because they spent a lot on operational technology, but the logistics failed. And there were 53-kilometer queues across the UAE border of trucks. They couldn't charge anyone. They gave the oil away for free. A ransomware incident is unlike anything that you've dealt with before. It's very, very different. So I'd like to have my hair back, but I've lost it. So I like NIST. NIST cybersecurity framework. I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs because you're probably very familiar with it because 70% of organizations think that it's best practice. So, we have the 23 categories under the 5 core functions, and then hopefully we have 108 subcategories, and then it links down to all of the controls that we're probably already using, either NIST, ISO, COBIT, or critical security controls. So it's very, very good. And the reality is NIST has given us some really good advice about ransomware. So there is a draft profile for what you need to do from the NIST CSF perspective to handle ransomware. And they've also produced 3 special publications related to how to deal with ransomware incidents and recover from them. So we kind of use this as our Bible and what we map onto in the way that we help customers deliver resilience. So, this is what we should have. We should have an equal balance between these 5 areas. But the reality is it looks like this. I indicated it earlier. We don't know where our data is. Even if we have in our CMDBs knowledge of our hardware and software assets, we don't have knowledge of our data. Now, is it the hardware and software assets that they're after? No. Is it hardware and software assets are largely commodity these days because we're moving to the cloud, we're moving to containers. We're treating our IT infrastructure as cows, not pets now, and it's replaceable quickly by cloud instances. So, we're still trying to catch up with that hardware and software. We have no clue where our data is structured and unstructured. So how do we protect it? Our entire cyber risk management concept is a complete farce when we're a business where we understand where 3% of our assets are. And then we get to respond and recover. And that is largely a hand grenade that is thrown over the fence by the security team to IT. So we've got all this wonderful case management, threat intelligence, rich context of the incident that we're seeing and what's happening. And it's all in security language. And then we turn it into text and send a remedy ticket to or ServiceNow, my ex-employer. We send a ticket to the IT team in security language and go, it's your problem now. Now, the problem with ransomware is the CISO is holding the toilet chain, but he is largely reliant on IT in delivering a response to what is going on. And I've seen in organizations, they start recovering, they recover everything, right? Because they don't know the impact of what's been hit. So they try and recover every system, which takes ages. Colonial Pipeline was mentioned earlier, and they got insurance to pay their ransom. But then they got a 16-bit decryptor, which was operating too slow, and they actually managed to recover quicker than they could decrypt the files. Now, I'm not saying who the recovery company that helped them there is, but they stood up at the Senate hearing and said, the reason why we were able to continue business so quickly is because we had a good recovery strategy and a good recovery vendor. So cyber resiliency, it's not something you can buy. It is something you do. It is not a noun, it is a verb. It is something that you do by doing good practice, by doing the right things. And if you look at the MITRE cyber resiliency model, and this is where I go into talking about Rubrik a little bit, because I'm much more about what's the process of getting you from where you are now to being resilient. And our product helps in some of that, doesn't deliver 100% of it, but it helps in a lot of areas. And there are these stages that are set out by MITRE. And, it's being threat informed. But then there's these really advanced concepts at the end, like the ability to move your infrastructure around and run deception grids and things like that. But it all starts with your ability to respond, to be able to detect ransomware and recover from those events. And that's the core thing that Rubrik does. We replace your legacy, 50, 60-year-old, backup and recovery solutions with something that is modern, it's built with zero trust, but we're built with a security mindset on top of it. So all of these things like detecting ransomware, malicious deletion by malicious insiders, or being able to run things like deception grids and clone production environments so you can do things like aggressive pen testing against it. It's our core business model. We just replace this legacy backup and recovery architecture, and you get all of these security use cases, like the ability to do digital forensics on systems where your logs have rolled off because they're over 90, 180 days late, all driven by a SOAR tool through our API. So you replace this legacy architecture, you get benefits from this IT modernization, but you get security for free out of that. So Rubrik helps deliver, across a lot of this MITRE way of doing things. Haven't got enough time today to go through it in detail, but then we deliver these value-added use cases as a security company atop every stage of the NIST cybersecurity framework. So we're able to detect that sensitive data that's got regulatory obligations in your environment because we look inside the backups. So we can actually detect that. Then we protect those backups using zero trust. And then we can do things, as I mentioned earlier, like enable you to do pen tests and aggressive testing and testing vulnerability patches on clones of your production environment. Then we can run deception grids. We can run Hunt so that you can look for IOCs across every workload, database, desktop, virtual, cloud, because that's all backed up. And we can look for those IOCs inside there. Then we enable you to respond by being able to do digital forensics, regardless of whether you've got XDR, file integrity monitoring, or the right logs in place, because we've got all that data at every point in time over there. And then finally, recover only what you need and recover it instantly. Nearly zero RTO and RPO, continuous backup, and the ability to live mount databases and servers and continue work in minutes. Now, what I want to do, when I built SOCs, I wanted to handle incidents in 3 to 5 minutes. I want analysts to be able to handle an incident 15 to 20 an hour. Now, I want your business to be able to handle ransomware incidents in 3 to 5 minutes. Contain, recover what has been deleted, detect it quickly, do this in an automated and orchestrated fashion. So this is what Rubrik is all about. We're a very broad proposition, but I kind of alluded to it earlier. We largely replace legacy data management, backup and recovery solutions, and then deliver security on top of that. So you don't need more licensing, more tools to manage. No problem. I'm finished anyway. Last slide. So,
yeah, please go ahead.
Excellent.
Please wrap up.
No, that's it. This is my last slide. So I was just going to say thank you very much. So.